The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
We were restricted from, essentially restricted from selling cars into the European Union, which is not nice. And I just said it's time that we play the game the way I know how to play the game.
The EU among those targeted with new tariffs. Who else could see new tariffs if they don't onshore their products? Plus, Harvard fights back against the administration over international student status, what a judge has to say about the policies. And then a new election on the horizon, why the Democrats could be set for a redo for multiple vice chairs of the party. This is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, Good Friday evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we begin President Donald Trump threatening trade partners in Europe with higher tariffs, possibly in an effort to get them to come to the table to discuss an off-ramp to the burgeoning trade war like he did with China a few weeks ago. The EU has taken advantage of the U.S. for too long.
I'm not looking for a deal. I mean, we've set the deal. It's at 50%. But again, there is no tariff if they build their plant here. Now, if somebody comes in and wants to build a plant here, I can talk to them about a little bit of a delay.
Now, on top of these tariffs on the EU, the president is also threatening 25% tariffs on smartphone companies like Apple if they don't start making their phones in the United States. National correspondent Matt Gelka breaks it all down.
The president spent Friday morning upping trade threats. That included a warning to the European Union saying he was, quote, recommending a straight 50% tariff on the EU starting on June 1st, 2025. There is no tariff if the product is built or manufactured in the United States.
I just said it's time that we play the game the way I know how to play the game. You know, they've taken advantage of other people representing this country, and they're not going to do that any longer.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Fox News he hoped the message would light a fire under the EU to make a deal.
I believe the president believes that the EU proposals have not been of the same quality that we've seen from our other important trading partners.
The threat shook the markets Friday morning. Separately, the president took aim at tech giant Apple, saying he had told CEO Tim Cook he expected American iPhones to be made in the U.S., not India, and then wrote, if that is not the case, a tariff of at least 25% must be paid by Apple to the U.S. Apple uprooting some of its manufacturing from overseas to produce products in the U.S. could lead to phones costing $3,500, according to some analysts.
Those are going to cost more. It's going to have a ripple effect across the economy. And I don't think that's the best way for us to address the concerns around our trade imbalance.
Cook met with Trump at the White House earlier this week ahead of the president's latest tariff threat. Apple pledged to invest $500 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years. But earlier this week, the company's manufacturer announced a $1.5 billion investment to expand manufacturing in India. Now, the EU already has a 25% tariff imposed on it for steel, aluminum, and cars, on top of a 10% reciprocal tariff on most other goods. The 90-day pause on a higher 20% tariff for the EU is set to expire in July.
Regarding the threat to Apple, Matt, can the president target one company for a higher fee?
Well, it's a good question, and for somebody sitting at home saying, okay, if it's going to cost $3,500, maybe I'll just not get an Apple smartphone, I'll get a different one. But when the president was asked about that today, he didn't mention just Apple. He mentioned Samsung and other smartphone manufacturers that are not making their phones in the U.S., and they would also be hit with a high fee.
Interesting. Live from Washington, D.C., thank you. President Donald Trump working to expand the nuclear energy industry in the United States. The president signed 4 executive orders easing current regulations for both the commercial and private industries. He is overhauling the Nuclear Regulatory Commission as well as expanding U.S. mining and enrichment of uranium.
President Trump here today has committed to energy dominance. And part of that energy dominance is that we've got enough electricity to win the AI arms race with China.
The technology's come a long way, both in safety and cost and everything else.
Meantime, in Rome, the United States and Iran held their 5th round of talks about Iran's nuclear program. Oman's foreign minister, who mediated the negotiations, says there was some but not conclusive progress. President Trump says he does not want Iran to enrich any uranium, a sticking point that Tehran has refused to accept. Both sides say they are open to more discussions, but no dates were set. And new information we are getting about the fatal plane crash in a San Diego military community. Officials say the weather alert system and runway lights weren't working at San Diego Airport as the plane approached before crashing. An NTSB accident investigator said the plane hit a power line as it approached the San Diego Airport before crashing into a house. There was very heavy fog in the area at the time of this crash. Among the dead, we know Dave Shapiro, co-founder of Sound Talent Group, as well as Daniel Williams, a drummer formerly of the group The Devil Wears Prada. Other employees of Sound Talent Group were also on board. The investigation continues. A 4th person has been arrested in connection to the New Orleans jailbreak. Louisiana State Police say 59-year-old Connie Whedon faces 1 felony count of being an accessory after the fact. They say Whedon was in contact with an inmate who's still at large by phone before and after the jailbreak. She even apparently sent the escaped inmate money through a cell phone app. Now, earlier this week, 3 others were arrested for aiding inmates, including a jail maintenance worker and 2 other women. You remember this video we've showed you. 5 inmates have been recaptured while another 5 remain on the loose. A total of 10 inmates broke out of jail last week. And a federal judge in Boston has blocked the administration's move to revoke Harvard University's ability to enroll international students. The judge called the move a blatant violation of the Constitution. Harvard immediately sued after the administration announced their decision yesterday. Now, regarding the decision on foreign students at Harvard, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem wrote, we have it pulled up for you right here, this administration is holding Harvard accountable for fostering violence, anti-Semitism, and coordinating with the Chinese Communist Party on its campus. They have lost their student and exchange visitor program certification as a result of their failure to adhere to the law. And the administration not just signaling out Harvard, as they have once again accused Columbia University of violating the civil rights of their Jewish students by acting in deliberate indifference towards the accused discrimination they are facing on campus. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has more.
In the hours after a gunman shot and killed 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, chanting for Palestine, free Palestine! President Trump promised Israel's ambassador to the U.S. his administration would crack down on rising anti-Semitism. The White House starting at a place many, including Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz, argue is the root of the problem. Elite college campuses and protests dominating those institutions since October 7th.
Look, Harvard has done some terrible, terrible things. It has not only tolerated anti-Semitism, it has actually fomented it by some of its curriculum, and it bears some indirect, but some responsibility for what happened in Washington, D.C. Harvard bears a lot of responsibility for the demise of education in America and the substitution of propaganda.
On Thursday evening, the Department of Health and Human Services found Columbia University violated civil rights law by acting with deliberate indifference towards harassment of Jewish students. Also Thursday, the Department of Homeland Security issued an order effective immediately banning international students from attending Harvard.
Then you see those same people picketing and screaming at the United States and screaming at, they're anti-Semitic or they're something. We don't want troublemakers here.
Citing the school's failure to comply with DHS records requests.
Harvard brought these consequences upon themselves.
The largest foreign student population comes from China. They make up 1/5 of all international students. Chinese President Xi Jinping's own daughter studied at Harvard. Reacting to the ban, the Chinese government says this will only damage the U.S. On Friday, an Obama-appointed federal judge issued a temporary block on the Harvard ban taking effect. Regardless, Dershowitz predicts the move will end with the White House ultimately getting what it wants. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Boeing is not going to face criminal charges over the two fatal crashes in 2018 and 19. The airline manufacturing company and the Department of Justice have agreed on a new deal to avoid prosecution. That includes more than $1.1 billion in advancements and fines. Some of the families of the victims oppose this agreement and say this avoids justice for their loved ones. And Vice President J.D. Vance addressed the graduating class at the Naval Academy. He congratulated all of the cadets there. You can see him shaking their hands, as well as talk to their families. The president has promised not to send them into the theater of war without a plan to bring them home.
Now, I want to be clear. The Trump administration has reversed course. No more undefined missions. No more open-ended conflicts. We're returning to a strategy grounded in realism and protecting our core national interests.
And in Europe today, Ukraine and Russia began exchanging prisoners of war. Here are some of the families of those prisoners and missing Ukrainian soldiers. They're waiting for the exchange in northern Ukraine. It is the first phase of what is expected to be the biggest exchange since the start of the war. Today, the swap involves nearly 800 people. By the end of the weekend, 2,000 people total will have returned. The agreement was not only significant and a significant outcome of the meeting, of course, between Kyiv and Moscow last week. And coming up next year, the Free Luigi campaign saw many supporting an alleged killer. Now that continues after a murder in our nation's capital. Experts weigh in. Plus, vote restored. Maine Representative Libby back in action, casting her first vote since she was censored for a social media post, and then getting sick in the hospital, not from the treatment, but how it's delivered, fighting toxicity of IV lines and bags. Rodriguez could be facing the death penalty if convicted for the murder of two Israeli embassy staff members, Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, Wednesday night. Eyewitnesses to the shooting claim he admitted to being the gunman, saying he, quote, did it for Gaza. Despite the tragedy, some pro-Palestine activists are posting on social media their support for the accused shooter, not unlike the public support for Luigi Mangione after he was arrested on charges of killing the CEO of United Health. National correspondent Janae Bowens has the details on the controversy.
We're seeing some pro-Palestine activists on social media showing support for 31-year-old Elias Rodriguez. He's accused of killing two Israeli embassy staffers at an event at the Capital Jewish Museum.
He just seems like a really normal guy who was very passionate about what was happening in Palestine. I don't know any group of people in the world that have achieved their freedom without violent resistance, unfortunately.
And then they're like, why would you ever do this? That's crazy. That. And I won't say, that I'm glad the guy did it or anything like that. I don't support violence. But let's just be real here.
Other posts go even further, calling Rodriguez a hero. One TikTok user posted a video titled Hero of the Month, and another with a caption that reads, "His actions were the language of a world that failed to listen to Gaza's pain." This reminds some of what happened last year when social media users rallied around Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing the United Health CEO. Ex-Washington Post reporter Taylor Lorenz faced backlash after saying the assassination felt like justice.
I do believe in the sanctity of life, and I think that's why I felt, along with so many other Americans, joy, unfortunately.
With the increase in anti-Semitism, especially on college campuses across the country this past year, I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised.
At the same time, many Palestinians are rebuking the actions of Rodriguez.
As a Palestinian, do not use the suffering of my people to justify murder.
The question now is whether this trend is here to stay, where support for controversial figures is driven more by shared beliefs than by actions themselves. For the National News Desk, I'm Janae Bowens reporting.
The Democratic National Committee is moving forward with possibly voiding the February election of their two vice chairs. From June 9th to the 11th, the full committee will vote to determine if they will recall David Hogg and Pennsylvania State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta and redo the election. Party members initially opposed the winners because they said the process placed female candidates at a disadvantage. Hogg has also come under fire for openly speaking out against certain Democratic congressional incumbents whom he called ineffective. Both Hogg and Kenyatta have spoken out against the push for a do-over. And Memorial Day weekend, it is expected to hit levels not seen in 20 years. Look at that. AAA says over 45 million people are hitting the road or taking to the skies for the holiday. Airports seeing a nice bump up from last year. More than 3.5 million people expected to fly. That is up 2% from last year. But the majority of travelers are expected to hit the road, with more than 39 million people driving to their destinations. AAA says this will be the most ever, according to their records. And some good news for them. Gas prices, they're actually down this year. You're looking at $3.08, it seems like. Gas Buddy forecasting that national average price of gasoline on Memorial Day, making it the cheapest Memorial Day number at the pump since 2021. Longer-term use of certain allergy medications could cause rare side effects for some patients. According to the FDA, some patients are reporting severe itching after they stop using antihistamines like Zyrtec. It's typically among patients who use the medicines daily for a few months or even years. About 200 cases have been identified in the U.S. between 2017 and 2023. The FDA is asking manufacturers to include a new warning about the risk. And we have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America, but we start in New York, where Democrats are getting blasted for blocking a bill that strengthens protection against anti-Semitism in New York colleges and universities.
Central New York Republican lawmakers are blasting Democrats for blocking a bill that holds anyone making anti-Semitic comments or actions at colleges and universities accountable. Republican New York Assemblyman Ari Brown released a statement Tuesday saying in part, quote, "This was a simple choice, side with Jewish students or side with people harassing them. Albany Democrats picked the wrong side."
We need both parties to get together, do the right thing, and move the legislation forward that needs to go forward to protect the Jewish community. It's just not acceptable.
It's absolutely devastating, shocking. It's a tragedy for our community. And I truly hope and believe that our local officials see this, recognize this, stand up, and know that they have to put a stop to hate speech so it doesn't continue to lead to this.
We can't stop living our lives, and we have to just put the necessary precautions in place.
The murder of 2 Israeli embassy staffers sending shockwaves throughout the Jewish community. Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky were killed as they were leaving an American Jewish Committee event in D.C. Seattle's local AJC office telling us armed security and vetting attendees is always a part of their reality when hosting any events or gatherings.
There's no location given until after they've been vetted, and there is a whole process. And this is our reality, and there's really no sugarcoating it. There's nothing we can do to change it.
But as the investigation continues, it's still unclear how the shooter was able to find out the location of this event.
The Jewish community lives with security concerns every day. Our kids walk into preschools past armed guards. Our Jewish community members go to services at synagogues past security.
There's no legislature that's above the Constitution. And censuring me in this way and denying my constituents representation was unconstitutional in multiple ways.
The democratically controlled House found that Libby's viral post regarding a transgender student athlete had violated its code of ethics. Libby refused to apologize for the post and says she still does not regret it.
I won't apologize for speaking the truth and defending our women and girls in Maine who are being discriminated against.
The office of House Speaker Ryan Fecteau denied our request for an interview, but says they will comply with the Supreme Court's injunction until the current appeal process runs its course.
Our full case will be before the First Circuit Court of Appeals on June 5th. This is a huge win to get my vote back for my constituents in House District 90, but we still need to win the larger case and ensure that they have a voice and a vote moving forward.
Coming up, thousands are getting sick in hospitals because of chemicals used in IVs. Why professionals have missed the warning signs for decades. There is new momentum to protect patients from a proven danger in IV bags and tubes. Medical professionals have been blind to the risk for decades, but Spotlight on America was there as a key group of surgeons heard about it for the first time. Lisa Fletcher reports.
When Acindia Chang found out she had cancer in 2023, doctors explained the risks of her aggressive chemotherapy protocol.
You think about all of the nausea, all of the, digestive issues, all of the symptoms, all of everything, all of the pain.
But she never thought that the IV bags and tubes delivering her treatment could make it less effective and even increase her risk of future cancer.
To find out that, that could actually be causing you more harm is, I don't even have words.
For more than a year, we've investigated DEHP, a chemical widely used to make IV bags and tubing more flexible. It's linked to numerous cancers and neurological issues and is so toxic that it is banned from toys and pacifiers. Yet, It remains in some of the most widely used hospital equipment. Studies show the chemical leaches from IV bags and tubes straight into the fluids being delivered into patients' veins, posing highest risk to those needing IVs most, like premature babies and cancer patients.
I am angry because if I was aware of it, I would have done something about it.
Dr. Lisa Bailey has been a breast surgeon for 4 decades and had no idea, like most medical professionals.
I have yet to meet another breast surgeon who's aware of this problem. Well, there's more to do.
For Bailey, that's more than an observation. It's a call to action. And why we followed her to the annual meeting of the American Society of Breast Surgeons in Las Vegas.
It makes you upset, right? I mean, why didn't I know about this?
Where she presented to some of America's top surgeons.
It interferes with chemotherapy.
About a risk that wasn't on their radar.
Doctors cannot possibly be expected to know the details of every single product they use. Whose responsibility is it to pay attention to these things?
I think that the FDA overall should have mandated it. And I think that they should have notified the medical community, not just the industry. Because if the industry didn't have any particular reason to want to change, then they just ignored it.
Alternatives are out there, but it's estimated as much as 70% of the U.S. supply comes from one manufacturer that predominantly uses DEHP. And with most medical professionals and patients blind to the issue, there's been little pressure to get the toxin out.
I think for me as a practicing physician, my assumption is that somebody else is looking out for those other things.
Dr. Tim Reeder is an ER physician and state lawmaker in North Carolina. When he learned about the risks of DEHP, he drafted a bill to ban the chemical in IV bags and tubes, mirroring a new law in California and one in the works in Pennsylvania.
Right now, very few people actually know about the issue. What I'm hopeful for is that I can tell my constituents, tell the people of North Carolina, we had this potential harm that we've now prevented.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
And there is a stunning footnote to this story. Dr. Lisa Bailey herself recently underwent surgery, and the very IV equipment she was given contained that toxic chemical. The hospital was unaware and had no alternative. Bailey now working with that facility and others to get them up to speed and hopefully create change. We'll be right back in 90 seconds. Billy Joel is taking a break and has canceled all of his tour dates for the rest of the year, citing a condition called normal pressure hydrocephalus. He posted the news online today. His doctors say performing could worsen the condition, which is when fluid presses up against the brain. All tickets will be automatically refunded, but if you want to see the Piano Man in concert, he says he looks forward to touring again after he recovers and hoping for that speedy recovery. That's going to do it for us for this edition of the National News Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening as we break down the severe weather. Thanks for watching. I'll see you at 10.